You are listening to the On Purpose Podcast, your guide to living a more purposeful life. Welcome to this week's show, everybody. I'm excited to have on somebody who is, it was awesome to research and get ready to interview. She is a self-described daughter of the Dakota Prairies, whose new purpose in life is to tell stories through historically accurate fiction. In her first book, Proving Her Claim on the Dakota Frontier, is all about women homesteaders and the success they had at creating their own claims. But first, before I jump into this story, I want to remind you to help pay your bill a little bit here. If you're getting value from the episodes, if you're enjoying the On Purpose community, help pay it back. And you can do that a couple ways. You can like, subscribe, share, review the podcast, whatever app you're on. And then if you want to go deeper, join us over at Patreon, where we have membership options from $2 a month to $50 a month. That's the low end's 50 cents an episode. If you're getting 50 cents of value per episode, join us there, where your financial contributions helps us chase our goal of being the most impactful podcast in the world. Joining us, you not only get some benefits like early access and stuff like that, you also get to know that your money's supporting this mission, and you get the pride and satisfaction to know you're supporting a small local business that has big goals, and we can't do it without you. So jump over to patreon.com/the On Purpose Podcast and pay your bill, if you will. All right, let's get to it. This week's guest, C.K. Van Dam, is going to be a fun episode, and I look forward to bringing you her conversation. Candy, welcome to the On Purpose Podcast, and thank you for being here to embrace our community. How are you today?
I am just fine. It's a lovely day in the Dakotas.
Candy, can you do me a favor and just give us a brief introduction so that our community starts to understand what they're in for the next hour?
Okay, well, I recently wrote a book about it's a historical romance, historical fiction about a woman who came to Dakota Territory right after the Civil War. And I retired and thought, I've got that book on my computer. This is the time to do this. And so I took the big plunge and published the book, and it went live in October.
Oh, nice. So it was on your computer. How long was it on your computer?
Oh, I hate to tell you.
No, you got to.
Probably about 20 years. I wrote it a
What?
long time ago. I know, isn't that silly?
20
But
years.
life got in the way.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
and then I had the time to focus on it. And so I thought, I've always wanted to do this. I'm retired. I can do new things and try new experiences. And that was the start of my book, Proving Her Claim.
Oh, I love it. 20 years it sat on your computer. How many
Yeah.
how many times did you go back to it in that time and think, man, I should just send this, or I should get this published?
Oh, not very many, because during that 20 years, I was a partner in an advertising agency. And so running a small business is really a full-time job. Plus, I had teenage boys and married and all those things that get in the way of life.
Yeah, life happens. Well, I'm glad it's published, and I'm glad we're going to talk about it. I'm fascinated by the story. I love Westerns, and I love what you talk about is wanting to tell stories through historically accurate fiction. I love that. But before we get to that, I got to warm you up a little bit. We don't like to just jump into our heavy lifting. So we're going to start, Candy. I need to know, you get stranded on a deserted island for the rest of your life, and you get one food. What are you going to eat?
Apples.
Apples. All right. Why apples?
Um, they're healthy, they're flavorful, they're sweet, but not bad for you. I like apples.
Well, you can always turn them into apple cider as well, and then you could have a really good
True,
night on the island.
true. Yep.
All right. You get one superpower. What superpower would you want to have and why would you want it?
Oh gosh. Oh, maybe to heal people.
Through touch or through your mind healing?
Yeah,
How would you
through
heal them?
touch. Yeah, hands-on healing. It would be. I have a grandson who's an empath. I think he's very caring for other people, and I love that about him.
Sure.
And I think that being able to help and heal other people would be a great superpower.
That would be good. What is your favorite book?
Oh, actually, I have two, and they're kind of different. My first one, well, I read both of them when I was young. The first one is A Wrinkle in Time. Um, it's um, it, it's it's a fiction, and it's a little bit of uh, supernatural, but it has an underlying theme that I think is for the ages, and the fact that good overpowers evil. And that was always my takeaway from that story. And Madeline D'Engle wrote that. It's a Newbery Award winner. It's just a fabulous story. And the other one I like, which is not quite as uplifting, is I love Gone with the Wind.
Okay.
And that one, Margaret Mitchell wrote that back in the 50s. No, it must have been the 30s or 40s, and then it was made into the movie. It's been really pounded as such a horrible take on slavery and life in the South before the Civil War and after the Civil War. But that's not why I love that book. I love that book because the heroine, Scarlett O'Hara, has a fabulous character arc. And she is such a strong woman. And I don't think that people who read that book or see that movie see that in her, but her driving force as she matured was to keep her family safe and make sure that their farm, their plantation survived through the Civil War and through the carpetbaggers and all of that. And that was really her guiding principle in life, even though people think she's kind of a flake. I thought she was a very strong woman, and I always loved her for that.
Okay. Yeah,
I
the great
know.
detail there.
Weird.
No, it's good.
Yeah.
That's it's fun to hear what people read and why they read it. All right.
Yeah.
You get to have dinner with one person. That person can
Oh.
either be still with us or have passed away. Who would you have dinner with and what would you ask them?
Oh gosh. Well, I had two history teachers that really influenced me. Polly Girton taught in junior high, and she inspired me to love history. And she's since passed away. She was a fabulous teacher, and thousands of kids went through her classrooms. And she brought history to life. She was not a dates and places history teacher. She was big picture. How does this affect us today, history teacher?
Love it.
And I loved how she framed events in historical accuracy.
Very nice. Yeah, that's history can be so fascinating
It can be.
and it can be
And
so boring if it's taught improperly.
well, my other one, and I know I only get one, but my other one was my history teacher in college, because he inspired me. I was a journalism major, went to college to write for a newspaper, and he called me and said, "Candy, we need some history majors." And I loved his classes, and I said, "Dr. Sweeney, I will be a history major, double major, if I can take all the classes that you teach." And he said, "Okay." And his area of expertise was the Civil War and Reconstruction. And that is probably why I love that era so much.
Yeah, absolutely. What was it um, about him that attracted you to wanting to do a double major there?
I loved learning about history. I loved it was fun. My journalism degree, my journalism classes were very career driven. I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I took history classes just for the fun of it. And it was entertaining, and it was enjoyment, and it was relaxing, and I always loved history, and that's probably why I wrote the book the way I did.
Sure. Yeah, fantastic. How are you feeling, Candy? You warmed up now?
Sure.
You're good to go? All right,
Oh
I
yeah.
want to start the conversation with a quote that I took out of your bio when in our pre-show work, and you said that you're a daughter of the Dakota Prairies, and I just found that fascinating. What does that mean?
Well, born and raised in eastern South Dakota, in Sioux Falls, South Dakota, to be exact. I've traveled a lot, and one of the things that I realized when I was in upstate New York a few years ago, it was all the trees, and I couldn't get over how closed in I felt. And I came back to South Dakota,
Mm.
and I could see the horizon forever. I could see the sun rising and setting way off in the distance. And yeah, there were a few trees here and there, but it felt open, and I didn't realize how much I loved the open prairie until I was in a very forested environment. And I mean, it's beautiful. I love trees. It's not that. It was just that I realized how much I loved the prairie when I wasn't there.
And that's so interesting because a lot of people will consider the Midwest or the prairie states like flyover states, like you just get
I
through them.
know.
What is it specifically about the open range there that attracts you or that draws you in?
Mm. I think you can see more things. I love watching hawks, and I have bald eagles up by my lake house. I love watching them flying over, and maybe the eagles will dip down and do a little fishing. I love watching the pelicans floating on the lake. I love just watching. I think it just feels like there's more to see when you can see forever.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that because I agree. And here's kind of what I believe too is when you're surrounded by trees, when you're in that environment, you feel like you're surrounded by life, right? Like everything is growing
Oh
around
yeah.
you. There's always stuff going. When you hit the prairie, or to me even right now as I sit in the desert, it's easy to overlook it and think nothing's happening because it looks flat. It doesn't look like much life. And then when you stop and actually
Oh,
watch, life is abundant.
yep, that is so true. And it's the same for the prairie and for the desert. There are so many things, and you can see them much more clearly because there's less to compete with that vision.
Yeah, and I think that's a great analogy for life,
Oh yeah.
right? I think sometimes in life we lose ourselves in the trees of life, which is like the busy work and the
Mhm.
to dos and stuff, and we fail to just stop and look and listen
Mhm.
and see. And
Yep.
that's the thing I love because I do love the prairies and I love the desert. Is it's slower, right? Like if you're gonna see something in the prairie, you're gonna have to stop and watch for a little bit. Like it's just not
Oh,
readily
and I
available.
do. Yeah, I do. At night, I like to go out and every night before I go to bed, wherever I am, I will go out and stand on my patio or my deck or wherever I am and look for stars. And I love to orientate myself with where's the Big Dipper, where's Jupiter, where are my stars? And I do that every night.
Oh, I love it. And what does that do for you?
It grounds me a little bit. It makes
Yes.
me feel like I'm part of something bigger. And I think that seeing the night sky is so awe-inspiring. I always write on my calendars when there's going to be a meteor shower because I want to go out and watch it.
I love it. And but I 100% agree with you. We are meant to be with nature, right? We're meant to be in tune with
Yes,
nature and in touch with nature, but so many of us won't take the time
yes.
to slow down and truly appreciate what's happening around us.
Hmm.
Yeah, and that's one of the things I love about this lifestyle we're in now, where we're just traveling and we get out in remote areas. Is I get such a great view of a unpolluted night sky.
Hmm. Yes.
So talk to me, and one of the things that really struck me as I prepared for this, Candy, and just even talking to you, is you were very much about strengthening our women and
Oh,
sharing the stories of powerful women. Where did that come from?
oh gosh. Um, well, I think that women need to support other women and women need to hear those stories of strength and courage and grit. Grit is really important. And by telling some of these stories, I I've heard from my readers, my grandma or my great grandmother homesteaded on the prairie, and I I've always admired her, and I will I just think about some of the things that she went through, and it's just amazing to me. But we need to tell those stories, otherwise they're going to get lost. And so I did a lot of research before I wrote the book. I read a lot of uh, books that were written about or by women homesteaders, and the letters home that they would write home, and the letters that would come back to them, or their journals, and just reading about their day-to-day lives as they were building a new life on the prairie or on the plains or wherever they were. um, what I found very inspiring, and it gave me some insights into how I wanted to structure the book.
What about you as a child, Candy? Were you a strong, would you say like a strong independent young girl? Did you always know this about yourself as a teenager, college student, or did you discover this? Like, talk to me about that.
Oh, well, so I'm the oldest of three girls. And so, of course, I was the bossiest. And I always said that I was my father's only son because I was the one that had to go out and he owned a body shop.
Okay.
He would repair cars. And before I could get a job, a real paying job, I worked in his body shop and worked alongside a lot of men who were sanding cars or doing things that were very physical. And that was one of the things I did. So, and I didn't think anything of it. And I would come back home with him at night, just covered in car dust
Yeah.
from sanding a car or a truck. And I just knew that I was making money to buy shoes. And that was what, that was why I was there.
Shoes?
So shoes, yes, I still have a thing about shoes,
What kind of
but
shoes were you buying?
I know that, but I think being the oldest child and especially the oldest daughter gives you you're born into a role that has some responsibility and authority, and I think that helped shape me. I also had a mother who was she worked outside the home when women didn't work outside the home, so she was a great role model that way, and I never thought that I wouldn't have a career.
Oh, very nice. So did they encourage you to pursue dreams beyond the car shop and stuff, or were you thinking you were going to
Oh
inherit
yeah.
that?
Well, yeah, my father never thought I was going to take over the body
Okay.
shop. No, but yes, they certainly enabled me. My mother said that her job was to provide opportunities for me to find out what I loved doing and what I didn't love doing.
Sure.
So, tap dance, uh, piano lessons, swimming classes, all of those things that my parents said, these are opportunities that we will give you so that you can find your path.
I love it. And what I love what you said there, Candy, that I think is so important, we miss so much in life is, or people miss, is it's just as important for you to find out what you don't like as it is to find what you do like. And the only way you'll know that is by acting.
Absolutely. Yep. And I tried to do the same. I raised two boys with my husband, and I always said that I said the same thing that my mother told me to them. I'd said, my job is to give you opportunities for new experiences, to find out what you like doing and what you don't like doing.
Oh man, that is such great advice. And that's truly the role of the parent, right? Like it's not our
I think
job
so.
to provide their happiness, right? And like you can't make somebody happy. All you can do is give them the opportunities to find what it is that makes them happy.
Right. Exactly.
And I think too many people nowadays sit around saying they're looking for their purpose or they're looking for happiness and they think it's just going to show up in their lap, but it really shows up through work and
Yes.
experience.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's fantastic advice from your mom. I'd like to hang out with your mom, I think. That'd be a
She was a pretty cool lady, I tell you.
I
She was a
bet it.
pretty cool lady.
Yeah, that's just a good generation right there. Like they really,
Yeah.
we can learn a lot from them, and that's what I love about history, is if you're willing to go back with an open mind, there is still so much you can learn today.
Hmm.
So talk to me about the homesteader passion you have, and
Oh,
specifically for the women that, if you go through history, like when I was growing up, the history we were learning, there wasn't a lot of stories that are women being told, but they were there. You knew it. They had to have been there, right? Because there were families. So,
so the premise, the spark, I think is a good word for this. The spark for proving her claim was a statistic that I encountered, well, over 20 years ago, obviously, that while there were only 12% of homesteaders were women, 42% of women homesteaders proved their claims. 37% of men proved their claims. So a higher percentage of women proved their claims, meaning that they lived on the land for 5 years, they improved it, they accomplished all of the criteria that the government through the Homestead Act required in order to get this free land. And they did it in greater numbers than men did. And a lot of these men, remember, were also married. So in order for these women to do this, they had to be head of household, meaning that they were not married, they were unmarried women, or they were widows, or they were divorced. And when the Homestead Act was passed in 1862, it took about 20 years for Congress to finally get their act together, so to speak, and pass this land transfer act, which is what it was. It was
sure.
transferring all this land from the Louisiana Purchase to American citizens to populate the prairies, which were already had people living in them, but that's a whole different story. But which I also talk about in the book. But when they said there was a lot of infighting in Congress about, do we include women in this with the ability to claim land? And time and again, these congressmen, emphasis on men because they were the only ones in Congress, laughed and thought, yeah, let's do it, but they're never gonna go out there and meet the hardships of being a homesteader to prove their claim. Sure, go ahead and do it. Let's include them. 5 times in the transcripts and congressional records, there are notes that say, And the congressman laughed when they talked about this. Really? Yeah.
So let me stop you there for a second. So real quick for our audience, Proving Her Claim on the Dakota Frontier is the name of the book. And so you're doing research for this book. So it's fiction, but it's historical fiction, correct?
Correct.
So you're doing a lot of
historically accurate
historically
fiction,
accurate. So you're doing a lot of research on numbers, and I love that aspect. How did you find those numbers? Like, where are the numbers available that talks about successful homesteaders?
Oh, well, that I cannot tell you the first place I found that statistic because it was so long ago, but I encountered it again and again in research books as I went through the process of vetting the facts that I was going to use in the book.
Yeah.
That again, it was 12% of women who were homesteaders, 42% of women proved their claims. And they had to be head of household in order to do that. So I found those statistics again and again. Now the congressional transcripts that I just referenced came from a white paper that I read that a law professor from University of South Dakota wrote. She specializes in family law and has done some deep dives into historical law that specifically affects women. And that was one of her white papers, was about how the Homestead Act of 1862 came about, and she quotes from the transcripts in the congressional record in her white paper.
Oh, gotcha. And the women had to be head of household. So for that, and that number to be as successful as it was in that era meant a lot of them were probably widowed from the Civil War. Would that be accurate?
That was very accurate. The Civil War decimated the populations. I mean, it was the most costly war that our country had ever had. And a lot of men died during the war, or they came back from the war and were either crippled physically or emotionally or both. And so that created a lot of spinsters as well as widows. So
what's a
that
spinster?
was my heroine was going to be a spinster. She could either live her life. Her fiance did not come back from the war. And so she decided, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make my own life and go west.
What's a spinster, Candy?
An unmarried woman.
That's what they called them, spinsters?
Yes, because they used to use a spinning wheel. It's very literal.
Okay.
But yes, that was they were called spinsters.
Okay, interesting. So yeah. I love that. So in your research for the book, what did you find that surprised you? What did you find that made you decide, like, I need to tell more of these stories?
When I was doing research for it, and I read through a lot of letters and reminiscence interviews with women homesteaders years and years later, just for other books, they talked about what fun they had. And, because we think, oh my gosh, it must have been a horrible life. And they worked themselves to the bone, and all they did was, it was such hard survival. And how in the world did they ever get through that? But again and again in these women recounted how fun it was and how much they enjoyed being out on their own, and the support that groups of women that were on the prairies had, and how they would get together. They would talk about how on Saturday night they went over to Mary Ann's house and they played cards until the sun came up. Those were accurate stories from these women about how fun it was. But what that told me was that these women were supporting each other as well.
Well, that's such a fascinating aspect, because you're right. We weren't told that
No.
ever, right? Like if at the beginning of this conversation you'd have painted that scenario to me, right? A widowed or a spinster heading west to establish their own claim, I would not have ever guessed socialization amongst other spinsters or widows.
Oh, there are a lot of pictures in the books that I collected to write this of these women with these great big leg of mutton sleeves, those big puffy sleeves that they would wear,
Yeah.
and the tight corseted skirts and everything, and they'd have their big hats, not bonnets. They had these big, beautiful hats on, and they would pose for a picture by a sadi. And there were 3 or 4 of them, and they would be talking in the caption. It would talk about how they had been at so and so's house for a picnic or something. And I
Wow.
thought, oh my gosh, that is, I mean, women do that today.
Yep.
And I think that's just, it's our nature, but they supported each other, and they were there for each other when they were on the prairie and claiming their land.
Yeah, I love that. And
Mhm.
and what a beautiful thing, because they had to support each other because their survival literally depended upon cooperation.
It did, exactly. Exactly. Women leaned on each other.
And I think that's sometimes we miss that in today's world where I see a lot of women are actually sometimes the other women's they're not supporting each other, right? That they're
Yeah,
we
and
tear
we
each
need
other
to stop.
down.
We need to stop doing that. We need to support each other.
I love it. And through that story, maybe that awakens some people to their relationships with other women. And are they
Mhm.
truly supporting and helping collaborate, or are we trying to tear their empires down?
And in the book, not only is it women homesteaders that I write about, because as I was doing the research, I would read about stories of especially in the area that I was focusing on, Lakota women would visit and support each other, and homesteaders and women homesteaders.
Really?
And they would befriend each other and would lean on each other. And that's part of the storyline that I wrote as well, that there were Lakota women that are a big part of this story.
I love that. And so we're on the same page because that was literally what I was just making notes
Oh,
on to ask you next. No, Candy, you could do this interview by yourself. You don't even need me right now. I want to hear about, because I love Native American culture, and I try to study it and research it as thoroughly from not necessarily what I was taught as a youngster, but I like finding their perspective on things, right? To balance stuff out, because I think we're in a new age now where we're really starting to appreciate history from all sides versus kind of the one-sidedness that I grew up with.
mhm.
And so you have a character in your story, Tuhawk Mackenzie,
Yeah,
who's a son of a Scottish fur trapper and a Lakota woman.
yeah.
So talk to me about his character development and some of the research that went into creating historically accurate stories.
Well, so the backstory on Two Hawks was that his father, James Mackenzie, was, as you said, a fur trapper and trader. Came to the prairies of, I don't even, back then, yeah, I think it was already a Louisiana purchase. I think we'd already purchased it then. But back in the 1820s and 30s, there were a lot of fur trappers that would uh, they would trade with Native Americans, the tribes that were out there, they would trap a lot of beaver, a lot of fur bearing animals, but especially beaver. And then the trappers and traders would visit these tribes and trade for things like maybe pots and pans or other things that they wanted, and that they would then take these bundles of fur, take them back east or to St. Louis or wherever for big to sell. And then they were made into those beaver hats that men wore during the 30s and 40s and 50s, 1830s, 40s, and 50s. But so that was, and a lot of these trappers and traders develop. They were out there on the prairies, out in the wilderness, without family, and they married or had relationships with women or people in the tribe,
Sure.
because that's all they knew.
Right.
And so that was not an uncommon thing to happen. And that was how Two Hawks was conceived, literally.
And why was it important for you to have a character in your story that represented this uniting of the two different cultures?
Well, at first I thought it was so that he would speak English better, because obviously his father would teach him English, which would make a lot more sense. But as I got into it and I realized that Yellowbird, his mother, and Mackenzie, his father, did not have, well, they had an unusual marriage. They married outside of their tribes, if you will, both of them. It was more accepting back in that time, but it gave my hero and heroine a template maybe on what to expect and how to approach their relationship.
Interesting.
Yeah, because it was two worlds, and
Yeah.
I refer to that several times during the book, that this will our two worlds can they join together? And that was one of the themes that went through the book. And that was James Mackenzie and Yellowbird came from two different worlds, and so did Two Hawks and Anna.
So how do you research or study or ensure that you have a Native American perspective and a story about homesteading, right? Because clearly their perspective would have been much different than the homesteaders initially.
Yeah, it was. And so again, there was a lot of not as much research, because there's not as much written about it.
Sure.
But I did. I talked with a lot of people about it. I had several people that were sensitive to that culture,
right,
that I worked with on it, and so those things helped me develop the characters and the plot line.
I love it.
And then I also made sure that I was accurate with the Lakota stories that are in the book.
Yeah.
And the cultural activities.
That's so, and I think that's so. What I would say, like I just listened to you say that, Kenny. Comes to mind for me is you're a steward of history, right? Because you take the time to accurately portray all aspects of it, not just one side or another, and that to me is so critical, especially in today's age when we want to erase unfavorable history. We want to pretend it didn't happen. We don't want to talk about it. And to me, that is such a slippery slope to repeating history instead of learning from it.
Exactly. We need to teach our children that whether it's uncomfortable or not, and some people don't like to talk about uncomfortable facts, but uncomfortable facts are what make up history.
Absolutely.
And if we don't learn from that, we'll repeat it.
Yeah. And you're so right. And here's the other thing that I love, Candy, is we can get away from truths and absolute truths, right? And what I mean by that is you and I can go through the exact same experience at the exact same time, and our truths of what we just went through could be different. Right? You have different life experiences than me. You have different background. You see things differently. You're a woman. I'm a man. Like it's all, but it doesn't mean you're wrong and I'm right.
That's right.
Right? Like we can all share our truths. And when we can engage in conversation and relationships and studies where I'm not out to prove my truth is superior to your truth and you're not doing the same, but our goal is to understand.
Mm-hmm.
What a beautiful relationship.
what are our shared experiences and what are our shared truths as well.
Absolutely. And that's what
Yeah.
I love. And um, just preparing for this, I really just enjoyed the research and looking into your book and looking into your story a little bit. And I love historical accurate fiction because sometimes nonfiction can get boring. It can get too, right? But by sharing it through a fictional story that people can relate to your characters, is a great idea. And I hope it does very well for you.
Thank you.
Now, I do have a question. I saw in the write up that if you like Yellowstone in 1883, that you'll love Proving Her Claim.
Yes.
So, what I want to get your thoughts on the whole Yellowstone series, and as somebody that's done research, what do you think of that show?
Um, well, Yellowstone, I think, is it's a very action-packed story,
Yeah.
and I think that is it Taylor Sheridan wrote
Yeah.
that, and I think that while it is a little bit more action-packed than life really is in Montana or Wyoming, it's a story about a family.
Yeah.
And when you come back to it, it's the family relationships that these people are interacting with each other, and there's a lot of backstory there that took a long time to spool out for some of this. And I think he's a fabulous storyteller, and I think he writes really engaging, exciting characters that people either love or hate, and either way, it's good.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. It's because I lived in Montana for a number of years, and we definitely didn't have near the crime wave there when I was there that Yellowstone has in a weekly series.
No.
But I like. I think I'm guessing maybe you. I enjoyed 1883 probably a little more because I liked the story of the hardship of the prairie.
I did too. I really liked it, and that one actually seems to follow the storyline in my book more because of the daughter who finally ends up marrying a native. And was he Cherokee? I can't remember what tribe he was.
Comanche.
Comanche. You're right, Comanche. But that those two worlds again seem to be a key plot line in that book, in that TV show. And I saw that as another reason to publish the book, frankly,
I love it.
because I looked at that and said, look at the ratings, look at the people who are
Yeah.
loving this story.
Yeah,
They might like my book.
for sure. Yeah, and I hope they do. So is this going to lead to a series then, or is this a one and done?
Oh,
I don't want to
so
put
I've
no
started.
pressure on you. I don't want to put
Oh
pressure
yeah,
on
no
you.
pressure. So I've started my in between. I've started writing another book about a woman on the prairie, and it has a different storyline than the first one. Obviously, it would have to, but it's still about a single woman who comes out and makes a life for herself. In between that, I wrote a children's picture book that I'm waiting to get illustrated. So yeah, so retirement has been busy.
That sounds fantastic. Now, are you going to include some travel as part of your research? Do you get to do that much?
That would, well, when I was out in the Black Hills last month before, I did a little bit of reconnoitering and actually visited a dugout, because this second story is probably going to have not a sadi, but maybe a dugout. I see this woman as being more West River. So
Okay.
I visited a dugout and kind of walked through it to kind of absorb some of that.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, put yourself in their history.
Yeah. And when we were riding around the hills, and most of it was on bikes, it gave me bicycles.
Yep.
It gave me and I'd go out there a lot to bicycle, but I looked at it with a different set of views when
Yeah.
I was doing it this time, thinking this could be where she would be doing X or whatever.
I love that. Yeah, the Black Hills are a very magical place for sure.
They are. They are.
Well, Candy, where can our audience connect further with you, follow along in the stories, and just stay engaged with you?
Oh, thank you so much. Well, the book is available on Amazon, and it is called Proving Her Claim. It's under my author name on Amazon is C.K. Van Dam. So you can buy the book on Amazon. I have a website, which is the URL is ckvandam.com, ckvandam.com. And I blog almost every week on there about topics like the inspiration for the book, the research I've done, my journey as an author, things that are happening, book news, I call it, things like that. One of my blogs was explaining what proving a claim means, because somebody
Sure.
said to me, "Can you explain what proving a claim is? I've never heard that term." Well, yeah, you probably haven't, because it's
Right.
100 years ago. So it has a lot of different topics, and I also put on there where I'm going to be as far as events. Like on Thursday, I've been invited to the Minnehaha County Historical Society's silent auction and book event.
Very
And I'm going to be
nice.
speaking at that, and that's in Sioux Falls. I've in January, I will be at the South Dakota Ag Heritage Museum in Brookings, South Dakota, for an event. And there are other ones in between. I'll be at a local tap room in December signing books
Very
in Sioux
cool.
Falls.
So
Wood grain.
okay, so you do a lot of stuff through your website.
Yeah, and all my if I'm going to be somewhere, I'll put that on my website if people want to come and talk to me or get a book signed or whatever. And there's
Oh,
also on my website, there's also a list of places to buy the book if you want a hard copy that's signed.
I love it. Candy, I can't wait to just show up at one of these events when I'm back up
Oh
in
yeah,
the Northwest, but it won't be until winter's
until
over.
spring.
Yeah, yeah. I got to wait till the snow is done flying. Candy, it's been an honor to have you on the show, and I want to thank you so much for the stewardship you are providing for historical accuracy in your storytelling, and for sharing the stories of strong women whose story hasn't been told for far too long.
Well, thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity that you've given me to do that, and I look forward to hearing from your listeners regarding the book if they have any questions.
Thank you so much. And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We will see you all again next week.